She called my wife an idiot at our own son's wedding. Not in private, not in a whisper, but loudly, carelessly, like it was nothing, in front of relatives, in front of friends, in front of people who had known our family for years. For a moment, the music kept playing. The laughter continued. But for me, everything went silent. I remember looking at my wife. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, holding her smile together like it was the only thing keeping her from breaking. And in that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. Not just anger, but helplessness, because it was supposed to be a happy day. Our son's wedding, a day we had waited for, dreamed about, worked hard for. And yet, in a single sentence, everything felt disrespected. But here's the thing, what happened next is something I will never forget. Because just a little while later, when the time came to settle the wedding expenses, when the truth quietly started revealing itself, the same woman who had insulted my wife was left standing speechless. You see, sometimes people are quick to judge, quick to label others as simple, uneducated, or less, but life has a strange way of correcting those judgments at the exact moment you least expect it. And in our case, that correction didn't come to arguments or shouting. It came through something much more powerful, reality. Let me take you back to how it all started. I am a father who has always believed in keeping his family together. My wife and I built our life from very little. She isn't highly educated, and she's never been the type to speak loudly or demand attention. But she has something far more valuable: patience, wisdom, and a heart that always puts others first. Our son, he's a good boy. Always has been. We raised him with values, with respect. And when he told us he had found someone he wanted to marry, we were happy for him. Truly happy. Because at the end of the day, every parent wants to see their child settled and smiling. When we first met his future wife, she came across as confident, modern, well-spoken, the kind of person who knows exactly what she wants. And at first, we thought, maybe this is a good match. Someone who can stand beside our son and build a strong future with him. But slowly, very slowly, little things began to stand out. The way she spoke, the way she would correct others, the way she would sometimes dismiss my wife's opinions subtly, almost politely, but enough to make you feel it. At first, we ignored it. We told ourselves, maybe it's just a difference in upbringing. Maybe she doesn't mean any harm. My wife, especially, never complained. Even when I could see it in her eyes, that slight hurt, that quiet discomfort, she would just smile and say, "It's okay. She's young. She'll learn." And I believed that too. I wanted to believe that. And that wedding preparations began, things became more intense. Decisions had to be made, arrangements handled, guests managed. And during all of this, my wife did what she has always done. She supported quietly. She worked behind the scenes, making sure everything was running smoothly, making sure no one felt burdened. But not everyone noticed that. Because sometimes the people who do the most are the ones who get seen the least. And by the time the wedding day arrived, all those small moments, all those little signs we had ignored, were about to come together in a way none of us were prepared for. By the time the wedding day finally arrived, the house was full of energy, noise, and people moving in every direction. Relatives had traveled from far away, friends were laughing, and the decorations made everything feel grand and celebratory. On the surface, it was exactly how we had imagined it, but beneath all that, I could still sense a quiet tension, something unspoken, something building. My wife had been awake since early morning, making sure everything was in order. She moved from one corner to another, checking on the catering, guiding the helpers, making sure guests were comfortable. No one had assigned her these responsibilities. She simply took them on, the way she always had throughout our life. And as always, she did it without expecting recognition. Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law was at the center of attention. Surrounded by her friends, dressed beautifully, she carried herself with confidence. She gave instructions, made last-minute changes, and spoke with an authority that made it clear she believed she was in complete control of the day. At times, her tone was sharp, but people brushed it off as wedding stress. I tried to focus on the happiness of the occasion. After all, this was my son's big day. He looked proud, excited, perhaps a little overwhelmed. I watched him interact with his bride, and I told myself that everything would settle down after the wedding, that whatever differences we were noticing now would fade with time. But then came the moment that changed everything. It happened in the middle of the reception, near the dining area. A small issue had come up, something about the arrangement of the tables or the timing of the food service. My wife, as calmly as ever, tried to step in and suggest a simple solution. She spoke gently, not wanting to create any disturbance. That's when my daughter-in-law turned toward her. There was a pause, just a second, and then she said it. Oh, please, don't interfere. You don't understand these things. You're just acting like an idiot. The word hung in the air. At first, I thought I had misheard it, but the silence that followed confirmed everything. A few people nearby stopped talking. Some looked down, others exchanged uncomfortable glances. It wasn't just what she said, it was how easily she said it, as if it carried no weight at all. I felt my chest tighten. My first instinct was to step forward, to say something, to defend my wife right there in front of everyone. But then I looked at her. She didn't react the way most people would. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there for a moment, her smile fading slightly, and then she nodded, as if accepting the insult. Without saying a word, she stepped back and walked away. That hurt more than anything else. Because I knew her. I knew how much effort she had put into this wedding. I knew how much she had sacrificed, quietly and willingly. And yet, in that moment, she chose dignity over confrontation. I wanted to follow her, but guests started approaching me, pulling me into conversations, distracting me. The event continued, the music picked up again, and slowly people began to act as if nothing had happened. But for me, the atmosphere had completely changed. As the evening went on, another situation began to unfold, one that no one had anticipated. It started with a discussion near the event manager's desk. There seemed to be some confusion about payments. Certain vendors hadn't received their full amounts and additional charges had been added due to last-minute changes. At first, it looked like a simple misunderstanding, something that could be sorted out quickly. My daughter-in-law stepped forward confidently, as if ready to handle everything. She spoke firmly, asking for the bills, questioning the charges, trying to assert control. But as the details came out, her expression slowly began to change. The numbers were higher than she expected. There were deposits that had already been paid, services that had been secured weeks in advance, and arrangements that no one seemed to fully understand except for one person. My wife. The same woman who had just been dismissed, the same woman who had been called an idiot. One of the vendors mentioned her name directly. He explained how she had personally come to confirm bookings, how she had negotiated prices, how she had even paid certain amounts in advance to ensure there would be no issues on the wedding day. Another vendor stepped in and said something similar, then another. Piece by piece, the picture became clear. While everyone else had been focused on appearances, on decorations, on controlling the spotlight, my wife had been quietly holding the entire event together from behind the scenes. I watched as my daughter-in-law stood there, holding the papers in her hand, her confidence slipping away. For the first time that day, she didn't have anything to say. She looked around, as if searching for someone to shift the responsibility onto, but there was no one. Because the truth was right there, in front of everyone. And for a moment, the same people who had heard that insult earlier now saw something entirely different. By the end of the night, the music had softened, the guests had started to leave, and the noise that once filled the hall slowly faded into a quiet stillness. But what stayed behind was something far deeper than the celebration itself. I found my wife sitting in a corner, away from the crowd. She looked tired, but calm, not angry, not bitter, just quiet, the way she had always been. I walked over and sat beside her, not knowing exactly what to say. Because how do you respond to something like that? How do you make up for a moment that should have never happened? Before I could speak, she simply said it's okay. And that was it. And that was. No complaints, no reminders of what she had done for the wedding, no mention of the insult, just those two simple words. But I knew it wasn't really okay. Not completely. Some things don't need to be said out loud to be understood. A little later, our son came to us. His face had changed. There was no excitement left, only realization. He looked at his mother, and for the first time that day, he truly saw her, not just as someone standing quietly in the background, but as the person who had carried the weight of everything without asking for anything in return. He apologized, not loudly, not dramatically, but sincerely, and sometimes that matters more. As for my daughter-in-law, she didn't say much. The confidence she had carried all day was gone, replaced with an uncomfortable silence. Maybe it was embarrassment, maybe it was reflection, or maybe it was the first time she understood that respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. That night taught me something I will never forget. People often mistake silence for weakness. They assume that if someone doesn't speak up, they don't know anything. That if someone doesn't show off, they have nothing to show. But the truth is often the opposite. The strongest people are not always the loudest. The wisest people are not always the most educated. And the ones who hold everything together are usually the ones no one notices until it really matters. My wife never needed to prove anything with words. Life did that for her. And in the end, without raising her voice, without defending herself, she showed everyone exactly who she was. Not an idiot, but the backbone of the entire family.